Have you ever noticed how she's drawn to the man every other woman wants, but loses interest the moment he's fully hers? Or how she posts every romantic gesture online but can't name 3 things she genuinely loves about him? Those aren't coincidences. Those are warning signs. Signs that reveal her attraction isn't about him at all. It's about what he does for her ego. Today, I'm breaking down the 8 female psychology red flags that show when attraction is just a mask for validation. If even a few of these patterns sound familiar in someone you know, it's not love. It's ego in disguise. And recognizing it changes everything. Before we dive deeper, ask yourself this. When you observe the relationships around you, how many are built on genuine connection versus how many are built on image, competition, or fear? Do the couples you know actually see each other? Or are they just mirrors reflecting what they want to believe about themselves? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, it's because most people never question what drives their attraction. They confuse intensity with intimacy, validation with value, and ego with emotion. Understanding that distinction is the first step to recognizing real connection. If you're ready to see relationships through a clearer lens, subscribe and hit like right now, and share in the comments, have you ever mistaken ego for attraction, either in yourself or someone else? Because what comes next will give you the framework to tell the difference, and once you understand it, you'll never confuse the two again. Number 1. Validation addiction over genuine connection. There's a profound difference between being attracted to someone because of who they are and being attracted to someone because of how they make you feel about yourself. When a woman operates from ego rather than authentic interest, her attraction becomes a mirror that reflects back an idealized version of herself rather than a window into another person's soul. This is validation addiction, and it's one of the most common yet overlooked red flags in female psychology. A woman caught in this pattern doesn't fall for the person standing in front of her. Instead, she falls for the image of herself that this person creates. She's attracted to the successful entrepreneur not because she genuinely connects with his values or personality, but because dating him makes her feel successful by association. She pursues the artist not because she appreciates his creative vision, but because being with someone artistic makes her feel more interesting and cultured. The relationship becomes a performance where she's both the lead actress and the primary audience. The validation-addicted woman often finds herself drawn to people who exist in her aspirational universe. These are individuals who represent what she wants to become, or what she wants others to think she already is. If she's insecure about her intelligence, she'll pursue the academic or the intellectual, not to learn from them or share ideas, but to borrow their credibility. If she's uncertain about her beauty, she'll chase conventionally attractive partners whose presence serves as social proof of her own desirability. The other person isn't a partner, but a prop in the elaborate stage production of her ideal life. What makes this particularly insidious is that it often masquerades as legitimate attraction. The butterflies are real, the excitement is genuine, and the emotional investment feels authentic. But underneath the surface, there's a transactional quality to the connection. She's constantly calculating what this relationship adds to her resume, her social standing, or her self-concept. When she introduces her partner to friends, she's hyper-aware of their reactions, seeking approval and admiration rather than simply sharing someone she cares about. This pattern reveals itself most clearly in how she talks about her relationships. The conversation revolves around external attributes and achievements rather than internal qualities and shared experiences. She'll mention where he went to school, what he does for work, how many followers he has, or what car he drives, but struggle to articulate what she actually enjoys about spending time with him. She can describe his resume, but can't explain his sense of humor, his fears, his dreams, or the way he sees the world. The validation addiction also creates a particular relationship dynamic where she needs constant reassurance that she's made the right choice. She's perpetually seeking confirmation from friends, family, and social media that her partner is impressive enough, successful enough, attractive enough. This external validation becomes the fuel that keeps the relationship going, and when it runs dry, so does her interest. If her friends don't seem sufficiently impressed, if social media posts don't generate enough likes, if the relationship doesn't provide the ego boost she anticipated, the attraction begins to fade regardless of the actual quality of the connection. Women trapped in this pattern often experience a paradox. They feel empty in relationships that look perfect from the outside. They've achieved the Instagram-worthy partnership, landed the guy everyone wanted, or secured the relationship that checks all the boxes on paper. Yet something fundamental is missing. That something is genuine intimacy, which requires seeing and being seen for who you actually are, rather than who you want to be perceived as. True connection demands vulnerability, and vulnerability is terrifying when your attraction is built on maintaining an image rather than exploring a reality. Number 2. Competition-based interest. The competitive woman doesn't fall in love with a person. She falls in love with winning. Her attraction operates on a fundamentally different mechanism than genuine romantic interest. It ignites not when she discovers someone's character, values, or the unique way they see the world, but when she perceives that someone else wants what she might have. This is competition-based interest, and it transforms relationships from intimate connections into battlegrounds where the prize isn't love but victory itself. This pattern manifests most obviously when a woman shows little to no interest in someone until another woman enters the picture. Suddenly, the man she barely noticed becomes fascinating. The colleague she dismissed as boring becomes intriguing the moment she learns he's dating someone else. It's not that she's discovered something new about him. Rather, another woman's interest has assigned him value in her mind. He's become a limited resource, and scarcity creates desire where none existed before. The attraction isn't personal, it's territorial. What's happening psychologically is that the woman is outsourcing her judgment to other women. Instead of developing her own authentic sense of what she wants and needs in a partner, she's using other women as barometers of value. If another woman wants him, he must be worth wanting. If multiple women are interested, he must be especially valuable. This creates a hierarchy in her mind where a man's desirability is directly proportional to how many other women desire him. She's not choosing based on compatibility or connection, but on perceived market value. The competitive woman often has a history of being drawn to men who are already taken or who have an abundance of female attention. She tells herself this is coincidence, that she just happens to be attracted to desirable men. But the pattern reveals a deeper truth. She's attracted to the challenge, the conquest, the opportunity to prove herself superior to other women. Getting the guy isn't about getting the guy. It's about winning him away from others or beating them to him first. The relationship becomes a trophy that demonstrates her superior value, attractiveness, or worthiness. This dynamic creates a particular kind of anxiety in her relationships. She's constantly monitoring other women, assessing threats, comparing herself to potential competitors. Her attention isn't focused on deepening the connection with her partner, but on defending her territory. She becomes hypervigilant about other women in his life, not necessarily because she's insecure about the relationship itself, but because other women represent competitors in an ongoing contest. The relationship exists in a perpetual state of defense, rather than a space of mutual growth and exploration. What makes this especially problematic is that her interest often evaporates once the competition is over. When she's won, when other women back off, when the chase concludes and she's secured the prize, the attraction diminishes. Without the adrenaline of competition, without the validation of victory, without other women to defeat, the relationship loses its appeal. She finds herself with someone she pursued intensely but doesn't actually enjoy being with. The conquest was thrilling, but the reality is boring, because the relationship was never about partnership. It was about proving something. The competition-based woman also tends to view female friendships through the same lens. Other women aren't allies or companions, but rivals for male attention, status, and validation. She keeps score, comparing herself constantly, feeling threatened by women she perceives as more attractive or successful. This creates a lonely existence where half the population is automatically categorized as potential threats, rather than potential connections. Her relationships with both men and women become transactional, strategic, and ultimately hollow because they're built on comparison rather than genuine affection. In extreme cases, she'll pursue men she doesn't even like, simply because another woman wants them. The desire to win overrides all other considerations, including her own happiness, values, or long-term goals. She'll invest enormous energy into acquiring something she doesn't actually want, just to prevent someone else from having it. Number 3. The fixer fantasy. The fixer fantasy represents one of the most seductive and damaging patterns in female psychology. where a woman becomes attracted not to who someone is, but to who she believes she can transform them into. This isn't love. It's a savior complex wrapped in romantic packaging. She sees a man with obvious problems, glaring red flags, or significant emotional damage, and instead of recognizing these as warnings to stay away, she interprets them as a personal challenge. Her ego whispers that she's special enough, patient enough, loving enough to be the one who finally changes him. This pattern often begins with a narrative she constructs in her mind. She meets someone emotionally unavailable, commitment-phobic, struggling with addiction, or carrying obvious baggage from past relationships, and she immediately begins writing a redemption story where she plays the lead role. In this fantasy, her love becomes transformative. She imagines that through her understanding, support, and unwavering presence, he'll heal, grow, and become the partner she needs. The relationship becomes a project rather than a partnership, and his brokenness becomes the foundation of her attraction rather than a deal-breaker. What drives this pattern is deeply rooted in ego and self-worth issues. If she can fix him, if she can succeed where others have failed, it proves something fundamental about her value. Every other woman walked away, but she stayed. Every other woman couldn't break through his walls, but she did. Every other woman gave up, but her love was powerful enough to create lasting change. His transformation becomes evidence of her specialness, her importance, her worthiness. She needs him to be broken so that fixing him can validate her sense of self. The fixer woman often has a history of being drawn to damaged or difficult men. She tells herself she just has bad luck, or that she's compassionate and sees potential where others don't. But the pattern reveals something more calculated. She's unconsciously selecting men who need fixing because functional, emotionally healthy men don't provide the same opportunity for her ego to prove itself. A man who already has his life together, who's already done his healing work, who's already emotionally available, doesn't need her in the same way. He wants her, but doesn't need her, and that distinction matters deeply to a woman operating from ego rather than genuine connection. This dynamic creates an inherently unequal relationship where she positions herself as superior, more evolved, more capable. She's the helper, and he's the helped. She's the teacher, and he's the student. She's the savior, and he's the saved. This imbalance might feel like love, but it's actually a power dynamic that protects her ego. As long as she's focused on his problems, she doesn't have to examine her own. As long as she's working on fixing him, she can avoid the vulnerability of being truly seen herself. His brokenness becomes a shield that keeps the relationship from reaching genuine intimacy. The fantasy also protects her from the risk of rejection by someone healthy and whole. If he's damaged, if he's struggling, if he's a project, then his inability to fully show up for her isn't about her inadequacy, but about his issues. She can explain away every disappointment, every unmet need, every moment of neglect as symptoms of his damage, rather than indicators that he's simply not choosing her. The fixer fantasy allows her to stay in relationships that don't serve her, while maintaining the narrative that she's noble rather than settling. What makes this particularly tragic is that even when she does manage to help someone heal and grow, the relationship often ends. Once he's fixed, once he's emotionally healthy, once he's dealt with his issues, the foundation of the relationship crumbles. She was attracted to the project, not the person, and without the brokenness that drew her in, the attraction fades. Alternatively, once he's healed, he recognizes the unhealthy dynamic and leaves to find a relationship built on mutual respect rather than a savior complex. Number 4. Trophy mentality. The trophy mentality reduces human beings to collectibles, transforming potential partners into status symbols that exist primarily to enhance the woman's image rather than complement her life. When a woman operates from this mindset, she's not seeking a partner but an accessory, not pursuing connection but curating an image. Her attraction is based almost entirely on external markers that can be displayed, quantified, and used to generate envy or admiration from others. The person behind these attributes becomes irrelevant, almost invisible, existing only as the vehicle that delivers the status she craves. This woman is attracted to what someone has rather than who someone is. She gravitates toward men with impressive job titles, expensive cars, designer wardrobes, or physical appearances that align with conventional standards of attractiveness. Her eyes light up when she learns about his salary, his social connections, his educational pedigree, or his real estate holdings. These aren't just positive attributes she appreciates, they're the primary drivers of her interest. Remove these external markers and the attraction evaporates because there was never anything substantial underneath. She's essentially shopping for a human being the same way she shops for a handbag, evaluating based on brand recognition, price point, and how it will look to others. The psychology behind trophy mentality is rooted in deep insecurity masked by superficial confidence. A woman who needs a trophy partner is someone who doesn't feel inherently valuable on her own. She believes her worth is determined by external validation, and that surrounding herself with impressive things and impressive people elevates her status. Her partner becomes an extension of her personal brand, a way to communicate to the world that she's successful, desirable, and superior. She's not building a life with someone. She's constructing an image for consumption by others. This pattern reveals itself in how she introduces and discusses her partner. Every conversation includes carefully placed details designed to impress. She mentions that he's a doctor, a lawyer, an entrepreneur, that he drives a particular car, lives in a particular neighborhood, or vacations in particular places. She name-drops his alma mater, his prestigious company, or his impressive connections. What's notably absent from these conversations is anything about his character, his values, his sense of humor, his dreams, or the way he treats her. She can recite his resume but can't describe what makes him unique as a human being because she's never really looked at him beyond his trophy value. The trophy mentality woman also tends to have specific, rigid criteria that have nothing to do with compatibility. He must be a certain height, earn a certain income, have a certain look, or possess certain status markers. These requirements aren't preferences but non-negotiables because they're not about her happiness, but about maintaining an image. She'll reject someone who could be an incredible partner because he doesn't meet arbitrary standards that exist solely to impress others. She'll stay with someone who makes her miserable because he looks good on paper, and breaking up would mean admitting she made a poor choice or downgrading her status. Social media has amplified this pattern exponentially. The trophy mentality woman curates her relationship for maximum visual impact. She's more concerned with getting the perfect couple photo than enjoying the actual moment. She strategically posts content designed to showcase her partner's attributes, the expensive restaurants they visit, the luxury vacations they take, the enviable lifestyle they lead. The relationship exists more vividly online than in reality, because online is where she receives the validation that fuels her ego. The likes, comments, and reactions become the actual reward, with the relationship serving merely as content to generate that reward. What makes this particularly hollow is that she often doesn't even enjoy the person she's with. She feels bored during their conversations, unfulfilled in their intimacy, disconnected from who he actually is. But she stays because leaving would mean losing status. She's trapped in a gilded cage of her own creation, surrounded by impressive attributes but starving for genuine connection. The trophy sits on the shelf looking beautiful, while she sits alone wondering why she feels so empty despite having exactly what she thought she wanted. Number 5. Reactive pursuit. Ization. Reactive pursuit attraction is driven by ego rather than genuine interest. A woman caught in this pattern only wants someone when they're moving away from her. Her desire intensifies in direct proportion to the other person's unavailability or disinterest. When someone is fully available, consistently present, and clearly interested, she feels nothing or even repulsion. But the moment that same person pulls back, becomes less available, or shows signs of losing interest, she suddenly becomes consumed with desire. This isn't attraction. It's an ego defense mechanism disguised as romantic interest. The reactive pursuit woman experiences her most intense feelings during the chase itself. The uncertainty, the anxiety, the not knowing becomes intoxicating. She's energized by the challenge of winning someone over, of breaking through their disinterest, of being the one who finally captures their attention. Her mind becomes obsessed with strategies, analyzing every text message, every interaction, every subtle shift in behavior. She experiences the relationship most vividly when it's uncertain, because the uncertainty keeps her ego engaged in proving itself. The question isn't whether she genuinely connects with this person, but whether she can make them want her. What's happening psychologically is that she's confusing anxiety with attraction. The nervous system activation she experiences when someone is pulling away, the racing heart, the obsessive thoughts, the emotional intensity, These physiological responses feel identical to falling in love, but they're actually stress responses triggered by perceived rejection or abandonment. Her ego interprets someone's disinterest as a challenge to her value, and winning them over becomes a way to prove her worthiness. She needs them to want her, not because she wants them, but because their wanting her validates her sense of self. This pattern creates a predictable cycle that devastates both parties. She pursues someone who's unavailable or disinterested, eventually wearing them down or catching them in a moment of vulnerability. Once she succeeds, once they become available and interested, once the chase is over, her attraction immediately begins to fade. What she thought was love was actually the thrill of pursuit, and without that thrill, there's nothing left. She finds herself in a relationship with someone she worked hard to get but doesn't actually want now that she has them. The person hasn't changed. Her ego simply isn't interested anymore because there's no longer anything to prove. The reactive pursuit woman often has a relationship history filled with dramatic beginnings and disappointing middles. Her stories are always about the chase, the pursuit, the dramatic moments of almost but not quite. She romanticizes the uncertainty, telling friends about the intensity of those early days when everything was unclear. But she can rarely describe a satisfying, stable period in any relationship because stability bores her ego. Once someone is committed and available, once the relationship enters the phase where actual intimacy could develop, she loses interest and begins looking for the exit or manufacturing drama to recreate the intensity she craves. This pattern also makes her vulnerable to manipulation by people who understand the dynamic. Someone who alternates between hot and cold, who gives just enough attention to keep her hooked, but never enough to fully satisfy her, can keep her trapped indefinitely. She'll invest years into someone who treats her poorly, interpreting their intermittent interest as proof that she just needs to try harder. Meanwhile, she'll dismiss kind, consistent, genuinely interested people as boring or lacking chemistry. What she calls chemistry is actually dysfunction, and what she calls boring is actually healthy, but her ego can't distinguish between the two. The reactive pursuit woman also struggles with self-awareness about this pattern. She genuinely believes she's attracted to the people she chases, that her feelings are authentic, that this time is different. She doesn't recognize that her interest activates only in response to unavailability, because acknowledging that would mean confronting uncomfortable truths about her ego and self-worth. It's easier to believe she just happens to be attracted to people who are hard to get, than to examine why unavailability is what actually creates the attraction. Number 6. Performative romance. Performative romance transforms intimate relationships into public spectacles, where the audience matters more than the actual connection. A woman trapped in this pattern is more invested in documenting and broadcasting her relationship than in genuinely experiencing it. She's not falling in love with a person. She's falling in love with the story she can tell about the relationship, the image she can project, and the envy or admiration she can generate from observers. The relationship exists primarily as content, as narrative, as performance art, where she's simultaneously the director, star, and most devoted audience member. This woman is more excited about posting relationship milestones than experiencing them. When her partner gives her flowers, her first instinct isn't gratitude or appreciation, but rather finding the perfect angle for a photo and crafting the ideal caption. During romantic dinners, she's more focused on capturing the aesthetic than tasting the food or engaging in conversation. On vacations together, she's mentally cataloging which moments will generate the most engagement online, rather than being present with her partner. The experience itself becomes secondary to its documentation and broadcast, reducing genuine moments to raw material for content creation. What drives performative romance is a desperate need for external validation of the relationship's value. She doesn't trust her own assessment of whether the relationship is good, whether she's happy, or whether this person is right for her. Instead, she outsources that evaluation to friends, family, and increasingly to social media followers. The relationship becomes real and valuable only when others witness it, comment on it, and validate it. Without that external confirmation, she feels uncertain, anxious, questioning whether what she has is actually worthwhile. Her relationship exists more completely in other people's perceptions than in her own lived experience. The performative romance woman carefully curates every aspect of the relationship's public presentation. She stages photos to look spontaneous, crafts captions that sound authentic but are actually workshopped, and selectively shares only moments that contribute to the narrative she's building. Arguments, disappointments, mundane moments, and genuine struggles are hidden because they don't fit the story. She's creating fiction masquerading as reality, building a highlight reel that bears little resemblance to the actual day-to-day experience of the relationship. Over time, the gap between the performed version and the lived reality becomes a chasm she has to work increasingly hard to maintain. This pattern reveals itself most clearly in how she responds to time spent alone with her partner versus time spent with others. Private moments feel less real to her, less valuable, almost like they don't count. She becomes anxious when too much time passes without something shareable happening, without a story to tell, without content to post. She'll actually create moments specifically for their shareability rather than for genuine connection, suggesting activities or outings based on how they'll look to others rather than whether she or her partner will actually enjoy them. The relationship becomes a production, where every scene is designed for external consumption. The tragic irony is that performative romance actively prevents the development of genuine intimacy. Real connection requires privacy, vulnerability, and moments that exist only between two people. It requires being seen as you actually are, including the messy, unflattering, ordinary parts that don't make good content. But a woman invested in performance can't allow that level of authenticity because it would shatter the carefully constructed image. She keeps her partner at arm's length emotionally, never fully letting them in, because true intimacy would interfere with the performance. She's so busy broadcasting a relationship that she never actually builds one. This woman also tends to compare her relationship constantly to others, particularly to the performed versions of other people's relationships online. She's competing in a contest where everyone is presenting fiction as fact, measuring her curated reality against everyone else's curated reality. This creates perpetual dissatisfaction because there's always someone posting something that looks better, more romantic, more enviable. She can never win because she's playing an unwinnable game, chasing an illusion of perfection that doesn't exist anywhere except in carefully edited social media posts. Number 7. Mirror attraction. Mirror attraction represents one of the most subtle yet profound ways that ego masquerades as genuine romantic interest. A woman operating from this pattern is only attracted to people who reflect her own identity, values, interests, and worldview back to her. She's not seeking a partner but rather a clone, an echo, a confirmation of everything she already believes about herself and the world. This isn't connection. It's narcissism disguised as compatibility. She falls in love not with another person, but with seeing herself reflected in someone else's eyes, words, and choices. This woman gravitates exclusively toward people who share her exact political views, cultural preferences, lifestyle choices, and even aesthetic sensibilities. She requires that potential partners listen to the same music, enjoy the same films, read the same books, and hold identical opinions on virtually every topic. She frames this as seeking compatibility, but what she's actually seeking is validation. Every shared interest, every agreed-upon opinion, every mirrored perspective becomes evidence that she's right, that her choices are correct, that her worldview is the only valid one. The other person serves as a walking affirmation of her ego, rather than a distinct individual with their own legitimate perspectives. What makes mirror attraction particularly limiting is that it eliminates the possibility of growth through relationship. Real partnerships expose us to different ways of thinking, challenge our assumptions, and expand our understanding of the world. When two genuinely different people come together, they create something neither could create alone. But the mirror attraction woman doesn't want expansion. She wants confirmation. She doesn't want to be challenged. She wants to be validated. She's not interested in learning from someone else's different experiences or perspectives because differences feel threatening to her ego rather than enriching to her life. This pattern reveals itself in how she responds to disagreement or difference. When a potential partner expresses an opinion that differs from hers, even on trivial matters, she experiences it as incompatibility rather than interesting diversity. If he prefers action movies and she prefers dramas, that's not an opportunity for each to experience something new, but rather evidence that they're fundamentally incompatible. If he has a different communication style, different social preferences, or different ways of processing emotion, she interprets these differences as problems to be solved or deal breakers, rather than as the natural reality of two distinct humans coming together. The mirror attraction woman also tends to be attracted to people in her exact same life stage, career trajectory, and social position. She wants someone who's achieving at her level, earning similarly, pursuing parallel goals, and facing identical challenges. This isn't about practical compatibility, but about ego protection. Someone ahead of her might trigger insecurity, while someone behind her might feel like settling. She needs someone who mirrors her current position so she can avoid the vulnerability of being in an unequal dynamic where she might have to admit she doesn't know something or might have something to learn. What's particularly insidious about this pattern is that it often receives social reinforcement. People talk about seeking partners who share their values as though this is obviously healthy, and to some extent, it is. Fundamental values around things like integrity, kindness, and basic life goals do matter. But the mirror attraction woman takes this to an extreme, where she requires mirroring on virtually everything, unable to distinguish between core values and surface preferences. She conflates someone not sharing her taste in music with someone not sharing her values, treating all differences as equally disqualifying. This woman also struggles with her partner's autonomous choices and separate experiences. If he develops a new interest she doesn't share, she feels threatened rather than happy that he's growing. If he spends time with friends she doesn't know well, she feels excluded rather than glad he has his own social world. If he expresses emotions differently than she does, she interprets it as him being wrong rather than simply different. She needs him to remain a mirror, constantly reflecting her back to herself, and any deviation from that role feels like abandonment or betrayal. The relationship that develops from mirror attraction is fundamentally claustrophobic. Two people who are essentially the same have nothing to offer each other except validation, and validation alone cannot sustain a partnership. There's no spark of difference, no creative tension, no expansion into new territories. Number 8. Scarcity-driven desire. Scarcity-driven desire is perhaps the most painful form of ego-based attraction because it has nothing to do with the actual person being pursued and everything to do with fear. A woman operating from this pattern isn't attracted to someone because of who they are, what they offer, or how they make her feel. Instead, she's driven by panic about being alone, anxiety about time running out, or terror about being left behind while everyone else pairs up. The relationship becomes a solution to a problem rather than a genuine connection between two people who enhance each other's lives. This woman looks around and sees friends getting engaged, married, having children, and reaching relationship milestones that she hasn't achieved. Instead of trusting her own timeline and waiting for genuine connection, she feels urgency bordering on desperation. She convinces herself she's attracted to whoever happens to be available and willing during this panic phase. The specific person is almost irrelevant. What matters is filling the role, checking the box, avoiding the shame and fear of being alone. She's not choosing a partner. She's grabbing a life raft in what feels like an emergency. The psychology behind scarcity-driven desire is rooted in external timelines and social expectations, rather than internal readiness or authentic connection. She feels pressure from family asking when she'll settle down, from social media showing her everyone else's relationship milestones, from cultural narratives about biological clocks and limited windows of opportunity. This pressure creates artificial urgency that overrides her ability to assess whether a particular person is actually right for her. She stops asking whether she genuinely wants this specific individual and starts asking whether she can make it work with whoever is currently available. What makes this pattern particularly destructive is that it often leads to settling in ways she doesn't fully acknowledge. She overlooks red flags, dismisses incompatibilities, and talks herself into attraction that doesn't naturally exist because the alternative, remaining alone, feels too threatening to her ego and sense of self-worth. She convinces herself that compromise is mature, that expecting genuine attraction and compatibility is unrealistic fairy tale thinking, that she should be grateful someone wants her at all. The relationship becomes an act of self-abandonment disguised as practical decision-making.